They say he could steal every scene he entered. 2-minute turns that left you laughing for days. From his Oscar-winning role as Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas to the silent fury of Leo gets in Lethal Weapon, Joe Pesci was the quintessential character actor who became a household name without ever aspiring to it. Yet at the height of his fame, he walked away from Hollywood entirely, trading flashing cameras for quiet afternoons in his New Jersey hometown. No scandal, no acrimonious split with studios. Just a simple decision that baffled fans and colleagues alike. Why would Joe Pesci quit acting when the world still clamored for more? It all started long before Martin Scorsese's first phone call. Born on February 9, 1943, in Newark, New Jersey, Joseph Frank Pesci was the youngest of two sons in an Italian-American household where family pride and street smarts were nurtured at the dinner table. As a kid, he'd mimicked the voices and gestures of local characters, bartenders, mechanics, even the priests at church, turning their quirks into living cartoons. His father, Angelo, ran a small bar on Springfield Avenue, and young Joe spent afternoons polishing glasses, absorbing the rhythm of conversations, learning nuance in every inflection. He learned early that people remember the details, the way someone raises an eyebrow, the particular lilt in their tone when they're angry, the sudden shift from jest to menace. In his late teens, Pesci channeled those impressions into stand-up comedy. On weekends, he'd sneak into local clubs, sometimes getting his bum rap, literally kicked off stage by bouncers who thought a scrawny kid was mocking their patrons. But word of mouth spread. Promoters started booking him for small casino gigs in Atlantic City, then in Reno and Las Vegas. By his mid-20s, Pesci was a draw on the B-movie circuit, earning a reputation for one of the sharpest tongues in the business. He didn't drink or do drugs. He channeled every ounce of edgy energy into delivering punchlines, unleashing verbal barbs that cut like a knife but left audiences in stitches. Hollywood finally noticed in 1976 when Warren Beatty cast him in the gangster drama The Gambler, in a supporting role that showcased his knack for volatility. Pesci played a wise guy level smoother. One look in his eyes told you he was both dangerous and unpredictable. Scorsese took note, and by 1980, Joe Pesci had landed the role of Nicky Santoro in Raging Bull. The performance was electric. Pesci's sudden eruptions of fury, his quiet undercurrents of jealousy, and bizarre humor undercutting violence turned a supporting part into a showstopper. Critics raved. Pesci steals the film, they wrote. Pesci himself was so overwhelmed by the acclaim that he almost ducked every award invitation, convinced it was a fluke. Then came 1990's Goodfellas. When the studio buzzed about casting De Niro and DiCaprio, Pesci stalled. He'd just opened an Italian-American restaurant back in Newark and was half tempted to stay behind the leaned counters, where orders flowed steadily and the applause came in the form of satisfied diners. But Scorsese insisted, reportedly telling Joe, "Put the apron down. Trust me, I've got a place for you in this film." Pesci arrived on set with a wary smile and ended up sparring with Henry Hill's narration, matching De Niro's gravitas with streetwise humor and sudden flashes of menace. His "Funny How" monologue became cinema legend, earning him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. A tidal wave of offers flooded his agent's desk, yet instead of basking in his breakout success, Joe retreated. He turned down roles in high-profile projects, from Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs to supporting parts in major studio franchises. Behind closed doors, he explained that constant travel and nonstop publicity zapped his energy. He craved normalcy, Sunday football games with old friends, trips to local fish markets, a barbecue at his parents' house where the only flashing lights were camera flashes from visiting fans. He feared losing touch with the community that shaped his sense of humor and humanity. Pesci's hiatus from acting stretched for nearly a decade. During the early 90s, while co-stars rode the blockbuster wave, he ran his restaurant, finely tuning pasta sauces and debating politics with patrons. Stories circulated that Martin Scorsese would call him weekly, gently urging him to return. Pesci would listen, nod, maybe pencil in a tentative date, then cancel at the last minute. He'd sometimes swing by a set to visit DiCaprio or De Niro, delivering off-the-cuff impressions that had crew members roaring. But he'd never stay for more than a few hours. He preferred the comfort of familiarity, the narrow alleys of Newark, the hum of the local ice cream parlor's freezer, The sight of his neighbors laughing at a softball game in the park, public speculation soared. Some blamed Pesci's notoriously private nature. He once sued a tabloid for labeling him Hollywood's wild card. Others wondered if behind his theatrical temper lay deeper struggles. Was there anger or depression or some old family drama driving him away? No one seemed to know for sure, because Pesci simply remained silent. He granted no interviews, let no pictures be taken, and kept his phone off the hook. He resembled a boxer who'd stepped out of the ring at his peak, disappearing before the final bell. But the truth emerged in 1998, courtesy of a recorded 20-minute phone message left on a producer's voicemail. In his trademark nasal drawl, Pesci explained, "I'm grateful for every chance I got, but I'm done with traveling and making movies. It's taxing, from sitting in makeup chairs to smiling for cameras to flying cross-country. I want to live like a regular guy, ride in a car without someone looking at me, hang out where nobody knows my name." When the message leaked, Hollywood gasped. Pesci's words felt like a declaration of war on the celebrity machine. A champion kicking away the crown rather than wearing it. 2 years later, he resurfaced in the Lethal Weapon franchise as Leo Getz. Again, a supporting role, again stolen in 2 minutes of screen time. Audiences roared to see that little guy, cracking wise amid bullets and car chases. But behind the scenes, Pesci had negotiated strict conditions. No more than 4 weeks on set, calls only between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., and no promotional junkets after filming wrapped. Paramount agreed, eager for the box office bump, but willing to bend for the man who could deliver that signature tone. After that stint, Pesci vanished once more, not resurfacing until 2019's The Irishman, Scorsese's 209-minute epic that traced the arc of organized crime through the 20th century. The industry buzzed. Could the man who quit acting 5 times really return for a project this massive? Pesci arrived on set subdued, unshaven, nearly unrecognizable under prosthetics. Yet when he spoke, his voice cut through the haze of age and makeup with the same spark. Those few minutes rejuvenated his legend, proof that his craft hadn't dulled, only waited. Oh, what's the real reason Joe Pesci keeps quitting acting? It wasn't concealed illness or artistic frustration. It was the simple yearning for an ordinary life, the thrill of slipping through the cracks rather than standing in the glare. He mastered one of Hollywood's most demanding gigs and then walked away because he valued laughter with old buddies more than another standing ovation. For Joe Pesci, acting was never about chasing fame. It was about capturing moments of truth on screen and then returning home, where life's smallest details felt like the biggest victory. During his first true hiatus in the mid-1990s, Joe Pesci redefined what it meant to be an actor off-duty. While most stars leased mansions or retreated to exclusive resorts, Pesci returned to the neighborhood that raised him. He'd wake before dawn, lace up a pair of battered sneakers, and jog down Newark's cracked sidewalks, greeting early risers with a nod or a quick one-liner. At a local deli, he'd order a bacon, egg, and cheese on a hard roll, chatting amiably with the owner about his teenage ball games. When a tourist recognized him, he'd flash a sly smile and say, "Not today, pal. I'm undercover. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just Joe Pesci, hungry for unfiltered mornings." Inside his restaurant, Pesci insisted on daily lunch rush shifts, slicing prosciutto, lifting pots of ragu, and fielding delivery calls himself. He treated the kitchen as his stage, each order a scene, each satisfied customer an audience applauding genuine flavor. His regulars recall him taste-testing specials, critiquing platelet consistency in the gravy, and forming spontaneous taste test panels with nearby tables. He became known not as that guy from Goodfellas, but simply as Joe, the loudmouth who made the best meatballs in Hudson County. The city buzzed. Hollywood royalty presided over the turnstiles at Newark Penn Station, but Pesci was more thrilled when old high school friends dropped in for a coffee. Pesci's commitment to normalcy extended to his social circle. He attended the same neighborhood block parties, brought folding chairs to Little League games, and never refused a round of pool at the local tavern. At one summer barbecue, he taught neighborhood kids card tricks he'd learned during slow scenes on movie sets. When someone asked for a photograph, he'd politely decline. "Sorry, buddy. No pictures. That's part of the fun, ain't it?" These choices fueled his mythos. He was a Hollywood enigma who refused the trappings of indulgence. While his contemporaries flaunted yachts and exotic vacations, Pesci found bliss in barbecued ribs and cheap beer. He'd later quip, "I've never seen a better view than the scoreboard at the gym, and I've been up all the way to Oscar night." Despite his self-imposed exile, Scorsese's calls never ceased. According to said Hands-On Casino, Scorsese would pace on the soundstage during lunch breaks, murmuring, "Come back, Joe. We need your fire." But Pesci's terms stayed non-negotiable. No long shoots. No publicity. "I'll come for one scene, and I leave." This standoff reached its zenith when Scorsese offered him a role in Kundun in 1996. Pesci initially agreed, then backed out, citing neighborhood obligations, a fish fry, a neighbor's birthday party, or simply Monday's pot roast. Scorsese grumbled good-naturedly on the phone, but they remained friends, understanding one another's drives. For Pesci, staying connected to home outweighed chasing another accolade. For Scorsese, working with Pesci was like plugging in a live wire, a spark nobody else could summon. The real pivot came in 1993 when Pesci's nephew, Mario, was diagnosed with a serious illness. Overnight, Pesci traded scenes of manic laughter for hospital vigil rotations. He slept in a fold-out couch in a pediatric ward, reading comic books and telling Mario jokes to coax smiles. When doctors praised his kindness, Pesci shrugged and said, "I'm just his uncle, plain and simple." The experience crystallized his priorities: time with family and community, not fame. After Mario's recovery, Joe held a block party in his honor, inviting everyone on the hospital staff. That celebration underscored his decision to keep acting in strict doses, always returning to vice versa, a balance between art and real life. Yet occasional breaks in his self-imposed exile illuminated how deeply the craft remained part of him. In 1996, Pesci agreed to voice a minor character in a low-budget animated short created by Newark friends. He recorded his lines in a makeshift home studio, improvising accents and attitudes like he'd done during late-night stand-up gigs. When the film screened at local community centers, children cheered at the sound of his unmistakable voice. To Pesci, that reaction was more gratifying than any multiplex premiere. He told a local reporter, "If they clap for an 80-second voice roll around the block, I'm a happy man." In 2002, rumors swirled that Pesci might endorse Scorsese's long-gestating Gangs of New York. On the set in Manhattan, co-stars spotted a camera crew filming a distant alleyway. Some assumed Pesci was lurking in the shadows, until they learned his scene involved delivering sandwiches to hungry crew members at lunchtime. He arrived unannounced, dished out Italian heroes, then disappeared before anyone could offer him a role. That stunt summed up his ethos: participate on his own terms, but keep fame at arm's length. His cameo in Lethal Weapon 3 cemented this pattern. He signed on only after learning the role required exactly 2 weeks of filming and 0 press junkets. His sole promotional appearance was an impromptu improv session at a local community college, where students dissected his comedic timing. He shrugged off glistening boulevard signboards, insisting the real thrill was watching students' eyes widen when he explained where a line came from. He laughed, "If they learn one thing about acting, I've done my job." The rest of the world continued speculating about his absences, but Pesci's concern lay with teaching and sharing craft, not chasing recognition. Joe Pesci's self-exile reached its apex in 2006 when he turned down lead roles in several high-budget crime dramas. His agent warned that studio goodwill could evaporate. Pesci responded, "I've got goodwill in Newark. That's enough." He insisted on simple contracts: one guaranteed paycheck, reimbursed travel, and a week to prep before filming. Any deviation meant automatic withdrawal. Reports say one studio head flew to Newark to woo him over rib tips and chit-chat, but Pesci declined to even meet. "I'm an actor when I choose to be, and everything else I'm just Joe from down the street," he declared. And then came The Irishman in 2019. Scorsese, nearing 80, cast Pesci as Russell Bufalino, an aging mob boss. The role demanded deep immersion, heavy prosthetics, dialect coaching, and 3-month shooting schedule. Industry skepticism soared. Could a man who quit acting 5 times truly commit to such an exhaustive role? Pesci surprised everyone by arriving early, reading the script relentlessly, and collaborating closely with Scorsese. On set, he whispered suggestions to Al Pacino about character beats, offered improvised lines, and shipped fresh cannoli for the entire crew every Friday. Perhaps it was the weight of age or the allure of working again with a trusted friend, but Pesci found renewed vigor. As cameras rolled, he turned every gesture into a study of restraint. Less was more, and he wielded that principle like a scalpel. The Irishman premiere ignited a global celebration of his talent. Critics hailed it as a career-defining performance, praising how he conveyed regret and hardened resolve in equal measure. At his first red carpet appearance in decades, he stepped out in a modest gray suit, offered reporters only a brief wave, and vanished into the crowd. But fans watched the film, elevating Joe Pesci from Newark's finest to cinema's enigmatic sage of restraint. So, when we ask why Joe Pesci quit acting, the answer crystallizes. He wasn't fleeing the craft. He was protecting it and protecting himself. He knew fame could corrode authenticity, and he refused to let it. Each break wasn't a retreat, but a reset, a return to real life's unscripted moments that fueled his artistry. In his life's ledger, the greatest entries aren't awards or ticket sales, but mornings spent sharing coffee with old friends, afternoons spent perfecting a family recipe, and evenings spent telling stories to neighborhood kids. Acting for Pesci was a craft to be savored in short bursts, then shelved so that life, unvarnished, unpredictable, and deeply human, could continue to teach him new roles. Even after the whirlwind of praise for The Irishman, Pesci's life reverted almost instantly to the rhythms he'd long prized. He accepted a single invitation to host a film workshop at New Jersey's Montclair State University, then vanished without fanfare. On campus, he arrived before dawn, wandered into the dim theater where students were setting up chairs, and quietly asked if he could run a microphone check. When someone remarked, "Mr. Pesci, we're honored," he shrugged and said, "Call me Joe." For 3 hours, he lectured on scene study, improvisation, and the importance of listening rather than waiting for your turn to speak. He spoke of fuel, that embers of truth and dialogue need occasional oxygen of silence to keep burning. The young actors scribbled notes, mesmerized by a man whose face they'd only seen framed by Scorsese's lens, now revealing the soul behind the mask. Shortly afterward, he embarked on another unexpected detour, a small-scale jazz tour in the tri-state area. A longtime drummer in neighborhood bands, Pesci booked a handful of venues, Hobbit-sized clubs in Hoboken and Asbury Park, under the billing Joey and the Neighborhood All-Stars. He played trumpet on a set of standards, seated beside musicians 30 years his junior. Between songs, he joked about going from bullets and wise guys to bebop and blue notes. Anyone expecting a star turn was surprised to see him lean into a sax solo with the eagerness of a street busker. Those nights sold out within hours, yet no tabloids reported them until months later, when a Newark blogger posted footage of Pesci quietly tipping his bandmates and hugging strangers in the crowd. It was vintage Pesci, immersed in craft, deflecting celebrity, and insisting that art need not always be big to be profound. While these musical evenings charmed a devoted few, Pesci's closest friends noticed a shift in his priorities. He became an even more devoted uncle to his nephew Mario's own children, who'd grown into teenagers themselves. On Sunday mornings, he'd drop by their home with a stack of vintage comic books, surprising them with obscure issues of The Incredible Hulk or early runs of Archie. He insisted on reading every panel aloud, marveling at the print quality of decades-old ink. To him, each rustle of a turning page was a reminder that stories endure beyond the bright lights of any film set. He baked chocolate chip cookies with the teens, coaxing them to experiments in baking that occasionally ended in flour-flecked chaos, and laughter so robust it reminded him of those stand-up club nights before Hollywood found him. Meanwhile, the lure of film scripts continued to flutter around him. He would glance at offers, sometimes a cameo in an indie crime thriller, sometimes narration for a documentary on famous mob trials, but he routinely redirected his agent to decline. In a rare phone interview with a British film magazine, he explained, "I just can't stand the idea of getting locked into a project that's going to keep me away from these kids or away from Newark's summer fairs. I value the freedom more than I value the pay." His words read like a manifesto on limits. That artistry blossoms when bounded by respect for all the other stitches making up a life. Occasionally, rumors would allege a full return. A headline might proclaim, Pesci set to return in Martin Scorsese's next masterpiece, only for Pesci to issue a one-sentence statement. "I'm flattered, Marty. Call me if you need a meatball recipe." The sleight of hand fascinated fans. A man with the power to shape expectations, choosing instead to keep his personal menu firmly off limits. In that way, he taught a generation of performers and observers that saying no can sometimes echo louder than any acceptance speech. As his peers aged under bright limelight or clung to fading fame, Pesci charted a different course. He cultivated a daily routine so ordinary that it became extraordinary. He rose at 6, drove to a local senior center to deliver donated books, spent mid-mornings at a public workshop teaching basic automotive repair to veterans, and returned home for family lunch at his sister's house. Between tasks, he tapped out ideas on his laptop for a screenplay about a retired boxer who finds purpose as a high school coach. He never mentioned whether he'd sell it. He wrote because it amused him. The communities he served spoke in hushed reverence about our Joe, the once volatile force of film legend who now stood alongside them in work gloves and grease-stained overalls, hands as ready to fix a car engine as to conjure an Oscar-worthy turn. Despite his withdrawal from Hollywood, Pesci's influence seeped into modern film. Directors peppered their work with nods to his style, sudden outbursts laced with humor, the juxtaposition of fear and fondness in a single gesture, the idea that supporting players can command center stage. In filmmaker roundtables, up-and-coming actors described studying Pesci's pauses, that pregnant moment before words explode, as crucial to mastering the tension of a scene. His ethos became a quiet but persistent presence. Authenticity over ego, connection over performance, community over celebrity. In 2021, a retrospective at the American Film Institute screened a restored print of Raging Bull, followed by Goodfellas and The Irishman. The sold-out event promised a Q&A with surviving cast members, but surprised attendees when Pesci himself walked on stage. His entrance drew a standing ovation, yet he waved them down. "I'm not here for pom-poms," he said, voice low but firm. He fielded 3 questions about craft, about growth, about the one thing he'd change. He paused, then replied, "I'd spend more time on the front porch with my dad and less time pacing under those lights." With that, he offered a single smile, tapped his chest, and walked off amid cheers that lasted longer than any scene he'd filmed. Now in his early 80s, Pesci's legacy stands as a testament to deliberate absence. He reminds us that creativity need not be tethered to constant production, that a single, well-crafted performance can echo for decades, and that the truest applause sometimes comes from a neighbor's nod across the street. He taught Hollywood and the world that quitting is not failure but a statement of values, that the art of living might sometimes require stepping off the set, off the stage, and back into the embrace of ordinary life, in an era where careers are measured by nonstop output. Joe Pesci's story underscores a different measure of success: the fullness of days, the depth of human connection, and the quiet satisfaction of having lived life on one's own exacting terms. He gave us unforgettable characters and scenes we replay with reverence. But perhaps his greatest gift is the example of a man who knew when to walk away, only to return on his own terms, time and time again.